CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to yet another episode of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Prof Moyo, the Director of the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment at the West Business School. We are shooting this episode at the margins of the 5th Annual Philanthropy Conference taking place at the Elephant Hills Hotel in Victoria Falls, popularly known as Mosia Tunya, the smoke that thunders. I'm very excited to be joined by Benjamin Bellegy, who is the Executive Director of Wings. Benjamin, welcome.
Thank you.
Before we started shooting, I was talking about, the ideal, the potential for us, as members of the African Philanthropy Conference to one day do a conference in Brazil. And we started talking about some practices there that are probably associated with historically people of African origins who are based in Brazil. I've even forgotten the name, but I think, can you just remind me and we talk a bit about that? Because I already had a light bulb that in the next 2 or 3 years, our next African Philanthropy Conference could actually take place in Brazil because of the many numbers of people of African origin in the Caribbean, in Asia, all over the world, but also because of the cultures that are almost similar to what we have. But the diaspora phenomenon is an important component, and as you know, the African Union actually treats the diaspora as the 6th region of Africa. So there's nothing that really stops us having our meeting in Brazil.
Absolutely, and I thought it was a wonderful idea. I was surprised and at the same time excited, and I could see the ways in which it makes sense. Obviously, you mentioned the diaspora, and there are many Africans, including from Congo, from different parts of the continent that have been welcome there, and there's a growing community. But the ties are much deeper and older than this, and obviously with the whole history of colonization in Brazil and the slavery, there were many African people that established themselves there by force, unfortunately, but who are today, one of the driving forces of the Brazilian culture and of the Brazilian economy and the Brazilian country. And the history that what I referred to was these communities that are called quilombolas, where some of the slaves managed to escape from the plantations, and they created their own communities hidden from the colonial state, and they managed to maintain some of these communities until today, where these African descendants have maintained some of the traditions and cultures from Africa, although they evolved obviously throughout history. And today we can discover these cultures and engage with them. There have been some interesting exchanges also between indigenous people, native people from Brazil, and people who were from Africa, and were helped again when escaping from the colonial system, were helped and merged with some of these communities. So there are many different aspects to the question, and I'm sure you would be extremely well received, and I would encourage you to consider Salvador de Bahia as the place for that meeting, because you would feel almost like in Africa, given the strength of the African heritage there.
No, thank you so much. We started there because you are based in Brazil yourself, and the reason why you are based there is because you are working with Wings, and Wings is legally, I would say, registered or located in Brazil. For those that don't know much about Wings, maybe we start at a basic level. what does WINGS stand for? And secondly, what do you do? WINGS as a platform, what are the different programs that you are working on?
So WINGS is the only global network that brings together a great diversity of actors who are helping the philanthropic sector, the philanthropy field, to be stronger, to grow, but also to be more impactful, to be more transformative. And we are a network. We have 220 members across the world, so about 30 plus in Africa, about a little bit more in Latin America. So it's quite diverse. About 45% of members are based in the so-called Global South, the rest in the West, and they work on all the different segments and all the different aspects of philanthropy. So some of our members, they help individual donors, they help the culture of giving to grow. Others are helping corporate philanthropy to be more impactful. Others are working with institutional independent philanthropy. So it's really across the spectrum from individual giving all the way to impact investing across the world. And that's the only platform where you can find such a diversity, both geographic, in terms of types of philanthropy, in terms of topics they're working on. And what makes it unique is that we're really trying to elevate the different ideas, innovations, practices of philanthropy really from all over the globe, and it's very important for us to pay attention to what's going on in places like Africa, where we see, of course, a huge historical tradition and deeply embedded culture of giving, but also some really interesting innovations and new models for philanthropy. And so what we do together as a community of organizations who are really passionate about the potential of philanthropy and giving around the world is, well, first we help each of these organizations learn from each other, be stronger at helping the sector to grow. So there's a bit of sort of communications, connections, convenings, and some benefits of being part of a community like that. But beyond this, we really see us as we see ourselves as a platform to catalyze change within philanthropy, and also with the environment of philanthropy, including the policy environment, because we really see that if we want to unlock the potential of philanthropy, we really need to both improve ourselves and our practices as a field, and we also need to improve our environment so we can thrive. And we know that right now it's a big challenge in many parts of the world to be able to have good conditions, including legal conditions to thrive. So we work on these different issues. The first one around influencing ourselves, our own practices. So there we know that the sector has a great potential for innovation, to help support movements, to help support transformation of economic models, to help work on really important issues for society. But we feel like we're hindered by sort of old practices that remain sometimes very hierarchical, sort of elite-based, and often a bit narrow, sort of narrowed around a very specific outcome that we want, or a set of indicators that we're after. And that hinders us from really playing a more transformative role in society. So we have launched an initiative called the Philanthropist Transformation Initiative, which is really bringing all the knowledge and the wisdom of philanthropic support organizations around the world together, and we're trying to work in concert to influence our peers, to influence donors and foundations everywhere. So that's one piece. We also work around climate, trying to get more foundations to integrate climate lens to their work. So that's the whole work around influencing, the philanthropy sector itself. And then on the policy front, we have a lot of work around elevating the voice of philanthropy on the global stage, a diverse voice that pays attention to also the perspectives from the Global South, very important to us. So we are at G20, at the UN, many different spaces. And finally, the third aspect is what supports everything else, is helping to build local infrastructure, local ecosystems for philanthropy on the ground. So there it's more like punctual projects where, for example, in East Africa or in West Africa recently, we worked in partnership with, on the one hand, the East Africa Philanthropy Network, on the other hand, the Trust Africa, and we actually with many partners like CAPSI and other networks that helped us to map this infrastructure, this ecosystem, and then see what we can do to make it stronger. So that in the end, if we have the right ecosystem in place on the ground, that means we'll be really able to influence the practice of philanthropy and to improve our regulatory environment. So it just helps to loop the loop.
Yeah. So over the years, Wings has really grown. I mean, not just in terms of size, but also in terms of maybe results. I mean, we may not maybe necessarily talk about impact, but visibility-wise, scope-wise, and I think in terms of just Wings having, leaving a track record. It's noticeable, and I think we will not be truthful to ourselves if we did not say we actually see Wings, we actually notice the work that Wings is doing. What do you think has been the ingredients of making yourselves this visible? Especially, when you say you have more than 230 members.
Yeah,
that's not an easy feat. It means there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that is happening there. Lots of collaborations, negotiations, but also lots of challenges as well. But at the end of the day, Wings is a force that in the philanthropic sector one cannot ignore. What do you think has been the ingredient towards that?
Well, it's not only a question of visibility. I think the visibility is the consequence of the change in positioning that we've adopted in the past few years. So I think it all goes back to our role. What are we here for? Because Wings has been there for more than 20 years, 25 years. So I'm not going to say the whole history, but basically, if I simplify a little bit, for a certain time, for about 10, 15 years, let's say, it has really been focused on, first establishing these bridges between continents that did not exist, and starting to include more, a diversity of players. But it was mainly inwards looking, and it was mainly sort of a space for learning between philanthropic networks and a few other philanthropy support organizations. And at some point, we started producing a bit of data on this infrastructure or this ecosystem of players that help the sector. But the real shift went when we realized that we had actually the potential, but also somehow the responsibility to leverage this incredible network that was global, that was covering the entire sector, to go beyond that, to go beyond like a good space, a good club, if I can say, between a certain type of organizations to learn. And so at that time, about 7 years ago or so, we really started to think, let's see ourselves not as a service-based organization, but let's see ourselves as catalysts for change. And we're working towards this change with all these members from all over the world, and we're trying to have an impact on the field, and we're being bolder as well. And that has led us to to grow the community. We also started to become more inclusive of what we call philanthropy and who supports it. And then it led us to establish partnerships with organizations like the European Union, or with some new foundations that did not support us before, because they understood that by working with Wings, they were able to have a ripple effect across the philanthropic sector. And that has led to growing the organization, growing the membership, and there's so much more we need to do, but we're doing our best so that this growth is not for us, it's not the point at all. It's really about how we can support our members, all these great organizations like CAPSI and Trust Africa and all the partners of this event, and how we can help strengthen your work, because this is where change is happening. So we're happy that growth has enabled us to also access some resources that we're now also able to redistribute, but there's much more we want to do around that.
But of course, we need to benefit from your global presence and ask you this question. The members that you have are operating in different contexts, whether legally, politically, economically, and cultural as well. And so your members will not probably be the same in terms of strengths, in terms of grabbing opportunities, etc. When you take a scan in where your members are based, Africa, Asia, the global north, what are the different characteristics or features that you can pull out and say, our memberships operate in this part. These are the things that we have to grapple with, or these are the opportunities that we should grab in Africa, in Asia, in the Caribbean, if you have any members there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, of course.
Yeah.
It's a permanent question across the work we do. Well, I think two things at least. One is that when we're playing this role of being a voice for the sector, and so you're asking like what is the voice of such a diverse sector? So the way we try to address that is by being completely open and participative. So it's not, me or anyone at the, at the Wings team that says, well, this is what the world of philanthropy needs, and we'll present it. We really have processes where we have working groups of members that come with their recommendations, with their ideas, with their perspective, their best practices, and our role is really sort of bringing it together and making it, impactful at the policy table. So that's a way we can embrace that diversity. And it's not us who dictate what it should be, but we just create the spaces for that to happen. So that's a really important one. The other one is, I would say, as we're starting to do more of what I call the ecosystem building work, so a bit closer to the ground, to specific contexts. There we really always work in partnership and with the members, so we're not imposing a recipe on what an ecosystem should look like. We're just, again, creating the spaces and the opportunity for our members to define it for themselves. So it's we have a very sort of bottom-up philanthropy vision, and we're trying to be always, listening and aware of differences.
What would you say are the unique contextual opportunities or challenges for your members in the different regions? So I know the members in Africa will have different challenges and opportunities compared to your members in America, in Europe, or even in Asia for that matter. Are there any that you are able to pick up and say, what, in Asia these are the issues that sees us, in Africa these are the issues, etc.?
Well, it's a good question, and I still ask myself that question. I don't necessarily have a clear-cut response, and I don't know if I'll ever have one, because I think there are, at the same time as there are many differences in context and culture and what's possible, etc., etc. At the same time, there are so much in common. There's so much in common in terms of what needs to happen and needs to change. So I think here on the African continent there is a very, very strong movement of players that look at the indigenous giving and the traditions of giving, and how all of this sector is there to support civil society. So there's a very strong, that's a very strong characteristic in Africa, whereas in Asia, I think the sector is a little bit more sort of business-led and elite-led rather than sort of civil society activist-led. But that being said, in Africa, obviously there's also a growing trend of corporate-led philanthropy. And likewise, you have a lot of community philanthropy growing in Asia. So just to say, it's there are some specificities, but I think in the end, the big issues we're talking about, they resonate across the globe in different ways, in different realities. But it's not like saying, oh, climate is irrelevant in this part of the world, or shifting power is only relevant in Africa and not in Europe, or this. I think the good news is that actually there's a common agenda we can work together on.
I mean, one of the things that I know in Africa we struggle with, and that's part of what we are doing, and you have also been doing it, it's just developing and building data sets. Data is one of those issues that has been such a challenge for the philanthropic sector. For example, just to know what are the flows of philanthropic dollars from Africa to Africa, etc. All those things. I mean, even this conference is really beginning to help us unearth some of those issues, but we are still a long way to go. But having said that, you were in two sessions today here in the conference. One of them was very specific to an initiative that you have launched and you are working on. the Philanthropy Transformation Initiative. Maybe we can talk a bit about that. What is this genesis? What does it seek to do? And what is the status? And the communities here, and how did it go?
Great. Yeah, I think it's interesting because the Philanthropy Transformation Initiative it responds also a little bit to your earlier question.
Yeah.
Because what we tried to do was to say, well, we all know there are challenges in the philanthropic sector everywhere. We see interesting debates and campaigns on, collaboration between philanthropy and other actors here, or shifting power so that it's less dollar-driven and more community-driven there. And so a lot of existing debates and tools and reflections. And we thought, how can we try to bring all of these together? Then it's not recreating the wheel, but just elevating what is being discussed, some of the ideas, some of the tools, etc. And what is kind of universal in a way that might speak universally, regardless of the context, and then it's up to everyone to take what they want from it and adapt it in the way. So we started this Philanthropy Transformation Initiative as an effort to bring that wisdom together, these resources together, and beyond that to try to emulate action and catalyze action between philanthropic networks and support organizations around the world. And so there was again a very participatory process with different task forces and research done with the support of the Cambridge, and we ended up with the framework that has 3 mindset shifts to it that underpin a set of 10 principles of change. And we started to also source document cases, concrete actions, like how, if you're looking at the 10 principles, let's say there is one around shift the power. We need more trust in philanthropy and more agency recognized for local actors. And so there we explained what that means and some of the nuances. We identified some of the existing resources from over the network, including some of the CAPC resources, by the way, and documenting some case studies. And based on that, trying to work with all our members to say, let's move this agenda together, let's have more strength together. So that's the Philanthropy Transformation Initiative. And what is interesting, and that's the segment to the other part of your question, is that one, even two, at least 2 of these principles of transformation we found directly speak to the need for data and the need to strengthen that philanthropic infrastructure, including the data infrastructure. And what we felt was like, if we want philanthropy to really become transformative, a foundation needs to think beyond its own direct impact. Because right now it's very much like, I'm Foundation X, I work on education in this country, and I want maximum impact on my project. And that's good. I mean, it's or you start moving from just sort of charity kind of approach to more strategic. But the problem is that it really doesn't help to have a ripple effect beyond whatever you do directly. The philanthropic money, even if you take Gates and everything, it's always going to be really a drop in the ocean. So if we want this field to have a real effect of transforming our models, then we need to find new ways. And one of the ways is to say, you're a foundation, think beyond just your own direct programs and actions. Think how you can enable other foundations, other actors, other players to themselves have more impact. And so we're saying one of the key things foundations should do is actually invest resources in building the philanthropic ecosystem, in building networks, in building collaborative groups, in building advocacy bodies, and in building data centers, and those who are going to be able to gather the data we need to advocate for ourselves, to say, well, this is philanthropy, look, we exist, and what we do is really important, and this has a great impact, but you need numbers, you need to convince governments that they should take you seriously, and that would be in their advantage and benefit to actually enable the space. So right now we have very, very, very little investment in all of this, especially in the global south where there's more potential and the greatest needs. And so that's one of the key messages actually of the Transformation Initiative is to do that and to have more of these investments.
Something keeps ringing in my head, which is that membership-based organizations have found it very difficult to still maintain themselves using the old concept of a membership-based organization. And I'm curious to know why and how you have managed to keep such a big membership organization. 230 is really big. I mean, there are people who are struggling with less than 100. What are the opportunities and the challenges of running such a large membership-based organization?
Yeah, so I think that the question around diversity and how you keep everyone together remains, but what is important is the starting point.
Yeah.
I think when you engage, in this case, in our case as Wings, like new members, and you say, hey, join this network, from scratch we're telling people, you know, yes, you're going to get some services and some benefits being part of Wings, but the main point is that you're going to join a community of change makers, and we want to make change together. And so the initial contract, in a way, is about let's come together and let's make some change happen, rather than we're going to just deliver services for you and you're going to have to be happy about us. If you're not happy, you're going to leave, or this kind of. So we're not trying not to be in this kind of relationship, but more in a partnering relationship where we help, you know, amplify everybody's work and catalyze collaboration. So that, I think, is helping us to be both a big, diverse, inclusive network, and at the same time to be able to move fast and to take action. I think the governance structure is another one. I mean, we have a light governance structure, so we ensure participation and voice of our members through the work we do. You know, the working groups, everything we do is always with, you know, task forces and members. They join us. That becomes their own space. But then in terms of the governing body, it's very, very light touch, and that allows us also to remain flexible, and that helps for sure.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think that's very useful, because most of the membership-based organizations that are facing challenges, they are still probably using the old model. We are here to offer you services. And so, you know, members see themselves as paying for services, and if those services are not given, then they ask themselves, why must I stay? But your concept is a bit different, which is that you are coming to join us so that we can co-create the future, the agenda together. Can we end, Benjamin, by maybe talking a bit about yourself? You know, so who is Benjamin? What's your background? What is it that has really influenced you to end up in the philanthropic space?
That's a good question. Actually, it has a lot to do with Africa.
Okay.
Well, the starting point is so as a student, and until today, actually, I was very much interested in the Rastafarian movement and reggae music. And after I ended my studies, I just wanted to go spend some time in Ethiopia just to learn about, you know, that long history and that culture. So I went there from a learning perspective, and sort of really just like with lots of humility. I was not going there to say, hey, let me see how I can help poor Africans or these kind of things. I was just really very, you know, fascinated by the history and the richness of the culture. And when I went there, I thought, well, let's not just be tourists. Let's just, you know, be part of something. So I did some volunteering there. And I think I've until today, it has really marked me a lot in my relationship to the entire development sector and ING world, because when I was there, I was really shocked by the way INGOs were seeing their role and how they were working. Because as I had come there from a perspective of sort of admiration for, you know, the culture and the history, etc. And I was seeing all these INGOs coming with their programs that they were just delivering, like they would do just the same in Vietnam or in Colombia or in Ethiopia. It was just the same, and they were only looking at what was not there, what was missing, what were the gaps, what was wrong, in a perspective of, you know, this place needs to look like what we know, it needs to look like the US or needs to look like Europe, and so there's so much they don't have. Let's help them, you know, and that has shocked me from the very beginning. So my entry point to the whole development work and sustainability work and philanthropy work later on was really from a perspective of actually, no, we need to, there's a lot of, there's so much we need to learn from. There are so many assets there. There's, you know, that we just need to, you know, sort of elevate that, support that, recognize that, and work with that as the center of the process. And so until today, that's what I'm also trying to do with Wings, is to see how we can generate, you know, more resources to support this local agency and transform the development models deeply.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it was yesterday. You were talking about, I think we were talking to Tendai about some musical group.
Yeah.
You know, from somewhere in Kwekwe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What's the name of the group?
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of a band from Zimbabwe called Zigzag Band.
Let's ask this guy. He's from Zimbabwe. Do you know the band?
Yeah.
He has never heard of it.
Yeah, right. So it's a very interesting mix of well, traditional music from Zimbabwe and then reggae music. And they created that merge that is really that I really like, but it's completely unknown. So don't worry. It's don't be surprised.
We are
that
definitely going to Google it.
But I also like Thomas Mafumo, and I like African reggae in general.
Lucky Dube.
Yeah, of course, Lucky Dube. That's the biggest one. The most famous.
Benjamin, thank you so much. You know, I know we are, you know, trying to steal your time here and there. I'm also taking advantage of the fact that we have a big group of people who are here, and if I can shoot as much content as possible and get you here in the African soil, in Victoria Falls for that matter, even the better. But finally, what's your take? I know the conference hasn't ended, but the first day of the main sessions, we started with the academic part, and then now we are dealing with the practitioner sessions, the opening session and the sessions during the day today. What's your take? What's emerging for you that you, if the conference was to end today, you would say, this is what I'm taking home with me?
Well, it was extremely rich, I must say. There were many important topics that were covered. Quite a few things. I think Ambassador Rudo said something important about you know, how to really ensure that African philanthropic institutions are truly owned by Africans, and that there is more domestic funding going to them. I think that's a big question. That's a big issue. That also relates to the need to invest in this local infrastructure, because if you want more giving from African donors that have resources, well, you need to build that trust, because we know now one of the key issues is the lack of trust. And so, but the trust is not just a concept. You need instruments, you need spaces, you need institutions to make that trust happen. And so that was one of the things that was really interesting. I heard also the representative of the MasterCard Foundation that also said important things about indeed the need to invest in this local ecosystem, in data, and you know, so that we can really harness the potential fully of philanthropy, especially institutional philanthropy in Africa. Of course, there was the very powerful keynote address by Naila Farouki from the Arab Foundations Forum about the need for philanthropy to be bolder, to be less silent about, you know, big issues, including what's going on in Gaza right now. And we had deep discussions about what that could mean and what it is that needs to change beyond instruments and vehicles, but in terms of worldviews as well. And what is the model of society that these NGOs and foundations are trying to build? Is it the same failed economic and governance model that has led us to the multiple crises we're in right now, and that is sort of threatening the future of humanity on Earth? Or is it something else? So I think there is something deep that we touched on around decolonizing not just the vehicles of philanthropy, but the worldviews behind philanthropy. May they be local or domestic, national, international, but what is the worldview behind philanthropic action, I think, is something really important. Yeah, and for me, obviously, one of the highlights of the conference so far is the session that you guys were on, which is really looking at, you know, international cooperation, but we now bring it into the philanthropic space. And I think, you know, going forward, I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of such conversations. I mean, rarely do we have the OECD, Wings, Africa-Europe Foundation, and bilateral organizations put on the same table to discuss how they each approach
their collaborative processes, but also partnerships, whether in Africa or in other regions. And for me, that was one of the highlights for me for today. I'm looking forward to tomorrow and Friday as well. I hope you are.
Of course.
Yeah. So
I do.
On that note, thank you so much, Benjamin. If the stars align, yes, please.
Becky, there's another thought because there was another really interesting moment on a breakout that I just left to join this discussion now. And it was talking about Indigenous philanthropy with Giving Tuesday and Trust Africa doing that research. And someone asked a really good question, and I just think that's a question Wings will work on in the future. That question is like, okay, we have identified some interesting indigenous traditional practices of giving across Africa. So what do we do with that beyond? So we are telling a story, great, but what else can we do? And the person said, is it something that could influence also the modern kind of philanthropic practice? And that I think is something extremely important. And that is something we would like to work on as Wings to think about traditions of giving and indigenous giving also in particular. And what that wisdom that is kind of a collective heritage of humanity, because you have these traditions everywhere. What can we learn from that wisdom? And how can that translate into change in the way foundations and mainstream institutional philanthropy is doing the work? That is a big topic I'd like to continue working on.
I'm glad you raised it, because before lunch I was also on another session which was looking at how to create sustainable, long-term, flexible funding for movements, and one instrument was the endowment. But the main discussion there was how to use indigenous forms of giving to construct a different form of endowment. And it seems like that theme is cutting across.
That's a great point, and that reminds me of a discussion I had with one of my board members at a board meeting where we were debating on philanthropy transformation. They were saying, but you're not going far enough. Transformation is not just that. And for him, who is based in Canada, the transformation, the big thing was about abolishing endowments, kill endowments was his thing, And I said, well, actually, I was just talking to Digan Ali, who is leading, a lot of voices from civil society from the global south, and her main ask was, let's create endowments.
She's working on that now.
Exactly. So I think it goes back to, it's not so much about the instruments or the vehicles it's really what is the worldview behind it. What is the set of values, that informs everything else. So we're back to this.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, and I really appreciate the moment that we have taken. Hopefully, if stars align, we might collaborate and host another version of the conference, the African Philanthropy Conference in Brazil.
We will definitely receive you and welcome you and support that with great pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was Benjamin, the Executive Director of Wings, based in Brazil. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.